Welcome, my name is Paul Mock. I'm with the Youth Ministry Office here at the Diocese. This is sponsored by both the Young Adult Youth Ministry and also the Religious Education Office. So welcome. If this happens to be your first time here, the bathrooms are down the hall where you came in. If you go down this hall, take a left. They're both there on your right-hand side. I think you guys are in for a great treat. As I was sharing with my wife this morning on the phone, she's like, hey, I hope the workshop goes really well. I said, you know, it's Bob McCarty. If he talked about the weather, it would be interesting. So you guys are in for a great treat. I have known Bob McCarty since 1992. When I went to,
When you were 2?
Yeah, when I was 2 in 1992. I went to one of his workshops at a national conference and was just very impressed with him as a speaker. And through the years, I've worked with him. He's been my boss at one time. Believe it or not, when I was still here, I was also working with the national CYO Sports under the Federation, and he was my boss at the time for 4 years. And so I know him as a boss. I've also served many years on the board for the Federation with him as the executive director for the Federation. He is now in recalibration in his life. And so I'm sure he'll share a little bit about that as he talks too. But he's enjoying life and doing great things and presenting all over the country on this Going, Going, Gone program. And so I'm going to turn it now over to Mr. Bob McCarty.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me, especially the folks in the back? And those who want to hear me, can you hear me? Those who don't, I have breakfast. Folks, first off, I want to tell you how pleased I am to be here and how pleased I am to see you here. One of the things that's happened to me over these last 2 years of working on this project, as I've traveled the United States talking about this issue, it's increasingly clear to me that this is starting to really capture the imagination and the attention of anyone in church work. And it seems to me as you hear the presentation and as you hear some of the research that we found and the data, it's appropriate that we need to pay attention to what's going on here. But here's my apology right at the very beginning. I wish I had all the answers. I mean, seriously, for those of you who came in thinking, I hope you tell us what the problem is, and then you tell us what the solution is, I don't have a solution. That's part of the issue here. And my fear is this. My fear is that we don't know enough yet about this issue of disaffiliation to begin to get into problem solving. My fear is that if we're not careful, we'll wind up solving the wrong problem. So we have to live a little longer with the chaos of church, which for us right now in this climate of church, that's become the new norm, hasn't it? But I maintain this. I maintain to be in church work today, you have to have a high tolerance for chaos. And I believe this. I believe, and one of my favorite passages out of Scripture is the Protestant translation of the Genesis story. And it says in that translation of the Genesis story that God created out of the chaos. That out of the chaos, God creates. I've come to believe that the Spirit of God is more present in chaos than in structure, than in order, than in bureaucracy. And so when we go through this particular era of church, when we're looking at both the disaffiliation work, but also the clergy abuse reports that keep coming out, in this moment of heightened chaos in the church, the challenge is to look for the role of the Holy Spirit and say, what's the Spirit telling us in the midst of this chaos? See, I believe that the chaos is not the lack of the Spirit. I think the chaos is one of the ways the Holy Spirit works with us and speaks to us. So welcome to the chaos. And I want to set the tone this way, if I can, to give you an image for this Going, Going, Gone research. And it's the image of territory and map. Now, we know that maps only work if they match the territory. And what happens when, for instance, in Long Island, Rockville Center Diocese, they have a youth retreat house at the end of Long Island, the island itself, and it's where the Atlantic Ocean and Long Island Sound come together. Several years back, a hurricane comes up the East Coast, a nor'easter. The power of the surf is such that it levels the sandbars that were off the coast of the retreat house, and it created new sandbars where previously there had been none. The person telling the story, Bob Scott's telling me the story, and he says what happened was they didn't update the nautical maps. He said, so in the springtime, you can watch these $1 million yachts come out Long Island Sound and then get grounded on these new sandbars. And he thought it was poetic justice. If you had $1 million yacht, you really should buy a new map. I'm thinking, isn't it interesting that the territory changed, but the map didn't? Here's the second story. You can't make this stuff up. You really can't. Burlington, Vermont last winter, February, I think, I'm reading in the paper about how these two people are driving down the road at dusk. It's kind of foggy, it's kind of misty. They're following their GPS. GPS says make the right-hand turn, so they do. And what they wind up doing is going down a boat ramp onto a frozen lake. They get halfway across the lake when all of a sudden water starts to seep into their car and they realize they have a problem. So now they got out of the car and they did fine. But I thought, oh, isn't it interesting? They're following the map that didn't match the territory. And then here's the third example. This is from Washington, D.C., where I've been working. D.C. changed some of their street from two-way to one-way. But all the GPSs haven't caught up to that yet. And so in D.C., it's hysterical. I mean, it's beyond hysterical. It's always hysterical. But now there's a new dimension to that, to these cars heading the wrong way down one-way streets. Again, that doesn't match the territory. See, here's the thing. We all carry around maps for our ministry. If you've ever had, now I know it's never happened in your parish, but in some parishes, when you hear something like, I'm sorry, we've always done it this way, or I'm sorry, we don't do that here. What you are hearing are people arguing for their maps. Well, what I would maintain is this, that the territory for church ministry today has changed radically. And if we try to read that territory with an old map, we're going to be ineffective. Now here's where the challenge comes in. I am not saying we throw out the whole map. I am saying that it takes a degree of humility and wisdom. It takes a humility that says, what in my map has to go? And it takes a degree of wisdom to be able to say, what in my map has to stay? And so today, when we look at territory, we're going to look at a little bit of what a map might start to include. But I think it's very, very important for us to suspend our temptation to do it the way we've always done it. Because I think the territory's changed. And then here's part of the challenge. I think there are some maps out there about young adults that say something like this. Well, you know what the problem is? Our kids are a victim of a secular culture. They have given in to the materialism and the hedonism and the individualism of our culture, and no wonder they don't have any thirst for God. Or the map sounds something like this. Well, you know what the real problem is? They don't know enough. If they just knew more about what it meant to be Catholic, they'd want to be disciples of Jesus, they'd want to be part of the church. Or there's a map that says, well, you know the real problem is parents. If parents just knew more about their faith and if they did a better job of passing on their faith to their kids, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Well, see, here's the problem with that. Now, there's a grain of truth in all those, but not one of those is an accurate map of what's going on with young adults. As we go through the research, what if there's a new map that's emerging? What if there's a new map that's forming that what's happening with young adults today? Now, when I say young adults, obviously, young adults who are young people and who will be adults. So the real key here is for us to keep this in context. And even though I'm talking about research with young adults, we're talking about the church. We're talking about the present young church and the emerging church. That's what we're looking at here. So what if there's a new map that's emerging? What if something's going on here in our culture where these young people are hungry for the holy, hungry for a meaning and purpose? And what if they're meeting those hungers in totally different ways? What if there's new ways for people to establish a sense of meaning and purpose in their life, to somehow make sense out of the great questions that they grapple with? I think this is a fascinating time. You just have to have a high tolerance for chaos. So, folks, welcome to the chaos. And here we go. And I want to start by saying this. I have a deep appreciation for what St. Mary's Press has done. 2 years ago, when St. Mary's Press, let me just show you part of what we're talking about here. 2 years ago, St. Mary's Press committed to this idea of having an open, honest, and candid conversation about young people, young adults, and religion and spirituality in our country and in our church. And what are we finding? And so 2 years ago, St. Mary's Press started by contracting with CARA. You may be familiar with the work of CARA, the Center for the Applied Research on the Apostolate. So we contracted with Cara, and the idea was that Cara was going to do this national survey of disaffiliated young Catholics. And I'll come back to that, but that's important language. I mean, that's who we were studying. We weren't studying all young adults, but we were studying disaffiliated young Catholics. And it's because we found that there had been a lot of research on young adults who've left religion, but no research on Catholic young adults that left their religion. So we wanted to look specifically at that group. And then what St. Mary's Press did in their commitment to that survey, we did the quantitative survey with Cara. Those results come back, and if you're familiar with research, what quantitative research does, it gives you a series of questions, and you check off your answers, and then the results come back in pie charts and in bar graphs. So it's quantitative research. We're looking at the quantitative research results. We, the research team, all of whom are in ministry, and we're looking at this going, you know what? There's nothing in here that's new to us. Seems to be a lot missing here. And we did a second kind of analysis, and this was new to me. A second kind of analysis called qualitative analysis. And what qualitative analysis does, it goes back to the original stories. It goes back to these young adults' original interviews. And you have to imagine this. We printed out, actually printed out like on the paper, their interviews, and we sat with scissors. Can you believe that? Scissors. In this age of technology, we had scissors. And we had to cut out of their interviews what are called units of meaning. And then we started to group them together. And here's what we found. When you do a quantitative analysis, it's almost like forced choice. You have these kinds of responses, and you get bar graphs. But when you do a qualitative analysis, when you start looking underneath their stories, you move from what I call symptoms to causes. And that was the first time I started to think through this idea that I wonder if there's a whole other way that young adults today are creating their maps for finding a sense of meaning and purpose. And so with that, with St. Mary's Press work, we did the quantitative and the qualitative, and I'm going to share a little bit of both. But to set the stage, I want to talk about Rachel. So here I am. I'm talking about, this is my new project. St. Mary's Press has brought me on. I'm going to coordinate this project around young adults in the church and why do they disaffiliate. Rachel and these two other young women, all three of them who work for national Catholic social justice organizations based in Washington. So the three of them are listening, and we talk about this, and Rachel says, finally. I said, finally? She goes, finally. The church is talking with us and not about us. The first learning in this research that we've been doing, the very first learning, is that we need to listen to their stories. Now here's the challenge. There's a difference between listening to learn and listening to respond. Have you ever found yourself in a conversation with someone and as they're speaking, you're already planning your response to them? I know, we've never done that. What we're finding in the stories is that the challenge for pastoral leadership today is that can we listen to their stories to learn what's underneath as opposed to listen to respond? You see the difference here? That's a critical insight, and I'll come back to that several times. But the question then becomes, with the disaffiliated, and as Rachel describes herself, and you'll see later in her interview, she describes herself as Catholic-ish. I have no idea what that means. I even said to them, I tell you what, and then the other two go, yeah, we're Catholic-ish too. I said, all right, this is new territory for me. I'll buy you dinner, you tell me what Catholic-ish means. And of course they said, yes, why? Because young adults are poor. So anytime you go to buy them dinner, yeah, they're all over that. All right, so, but the question then becomes for them, do we know who they are, these disaffiliated young Catholics, Catholics who walked away, do we know who they are? Do we even miss them now that they're gone? And do they know we miss them? And here's my fear about this. If we're not careful as pastoral leaders, now here's my, I've done pastoral ministry for 45 years, and June 1st was my 45th anniversary of full-time pastoral ministry in the church. I am going right to heaven. I figure days off in purgatory. It's got to be at least one in one. But here's my insight around this. Not one of us in here has more time. There's not one of us in here has more hours to put into the disaffiliated. Seems to me if we're not careful, what we're going to be doing is we will keep on doing maintenance ministry and not missionary ministry. If we're not careful, we will keep doing what we've been doing because it takes up all of our time. We've created systems and programs that just take a lot of person hours to maintain them. I have a fear, though, that this disaffiliated study, I think this is starting to look at the one lost sheep. I've been thinking of that as looking for the lost sheep. And the problem in the research is not just one lost sheep out of 100. Now it's 36 lost sheep out of 100. That about 36% of young adults are nones. And I'll come back to all that. So in this ministry of ours with the lost sheep, let's start with your lived experiences. So here's what I'd like you to do. I want you to think for a moment, if you know any young adults who walked away from the church, who are now disaffiliated, and the only criteria is you have to know them by name. Don't pick a group of young adults, but pick a specific individual that you know by name who's walked away from the church, who's disaffiliated. And as soon as you have that person in your mind, first off, I think it's kind of fun that, I think it's kind of touching that we would hold that person in our mind. It's a way of praying for them. But it also makes this real. I mean, we move beyond data, and now we're talking about people's lives. I'm going to ask you to do this if you would. Would you mind introducing that person that you're holding in your mind? Introduce it to the person sitting next to you, just to make it personal. And if you're sitting next to someone you don't know, introduce yourself. There's a concept in church. Introduce yourself. And this is like 1 minute. I mean, it's 1 minute, but tell the person you're sitting next to, here's who you're thinking about. All right? So introduce that person to someone sitting next to you. That person who's walked away from church. I'm amazed at people's response, and it's always 80 to 90% of us are choosing family members. So just recently, I asked that question. I asked how many chose a family member. That's as far as I got. And this woman yells out from the group, and I feel so guilty. That's what she said. I feel guilty. She chose her, and she said, I feel so guilty that I can't pass on the faith that's important to me. I can't pass it on to my own children. And another woman said, and I feel angry, because the church I'm serving is not serving my own young people, my own children. So, whoa, the games begin. Here we go. And it struck me. It struck me on several levels. The first way it struck me was this. I said to them, if I asked you to describe the young person that you're holding in your mind, here's my guess. My guess is that I'll bet they're pretty good people. I'll bet the ones that you're thinking about are good people. I'll bet they're people of solid values, integrity, character, trying to make the sense out of life. I'm going to bet. And so what that alone tells us is that there's a changing landscape here about how youth and young adults are trying to find a sense of meaning and purpose and make sense. All right, let me just say this. I had these soapboxes. You can't see them. I have a whole stack of soapboxes here that I just jump on at different times. But here's one of them. I think that there are the 5 fundamental hungers that youth and young adults have, and I suspect it's true for adults too. But first, there's a hunger for meaning and purpose. I think youth and young adults are trying really hard to make sense out of their lives. If you hear youth or young adults say something like, does God have a plan for me? What does the future hold? That reflects the hunger for meaning and purpose. They have a hunger for connection. They all want to belong somewhere. And I'll come back to that because that's an issue in our research. The third is they have a hunger for recognition. I think that youth today are looking for, they want to be validated that they have gifts to share with the wider community. They want to be recognized as bringing something to the table. I think the fourth is the hunger for the holy. And by the way, I think our souls are imprinted with that hunger for the holy. See, our theology says that we are made in the image and likeness of God. It's in Genesis 1:20 something. I could make up a number for your Catholics. I think it's 123, maybe 120. It's in there somewhere, and I'm sure some of you will have to figure it out before I'm done talking. You're already Googling it. But this whole idea, if we believe what we say, that we are made in the image and likeness of God, that means we have imprinted in our soul this hunger for the Creator. It's imprinted. Augustine was right. I'm sure Augustine was happy to hear me say that my soul is restless, Lord, so I rest in Thee. That's the hunger for the holy. See, the difference, though, is I think people today are using different language. It's the same hunger. And I'll come back. And then the fifth hunger, I think there's a hunger for justice. And you're going to hear that too in the research. I think our young people have a hunger for justice. And you know this. Any of you who are parents and you're willing to talk about it, you know right away. Your kids know when things are out of bounds. And what do they say at the very earliest ages? It's not fair, seriously. Any parent knows this stuff. And now every time a kid says that, the justice issue, I don't think so. But it does tell you that they are aware, doesn't it? Well, so here's the thing then. If these are the hungers that are going on, then the question is going to become, and if those young people you're holding in your mind are really good people, the question becomes, where are those hungers being fed? So I think that's the first thing I want to say about these young people in your heads, which is a funny way to phrase that, isn't it? Because these young people in your heads. Like, I have all these voices in my head, and I know they're not real, but sometimes they have really good ideas. But here's the second thing. If we believe our theology of church, if we believe that we are the church, not the building is the church, then what that means is as long as you stay in relationship with those young adults who walked away, they are in relationship with the church. You get that? They can't let go of that. They can't. As long as we are in relationship with them, they are in relationship to the church. And I heard this somewhere way back early in my youth ministry career about, and relax. Because Jesus is in management, we're just in sales. And so sometimes we have to relax about this. But I want you to take heart, and we have a sense of hope about this. If we are willing to stay in relationship with them, they are in relationship with the church. One of the things that I'll get to towards the very end here is one of the shifts in the territory that I think is happening is even how we define Catholic. And that's not an issue that has been resolved at all. And I think it's being discussed, but I'll come back to how I frame that in terms of what we're doing here. So having said that then, here's a little bit of the context. Here's some of the research. We know most of them leave before 21 years old. We know that what tends to happen is they oftentimes are coming out of households that are not engaged, so there's a bigger issue going on here that I think is really important. Half of them become unaffiliated or non, so I'll break that over for you in a moment. Half become something else. You can see the percent of young adults. I think what's really important here, use 36% is roughly 36% of young adults today are disaffiliated. But when you start to look at our country, it's estimated that about 22, almost 23% of Americans are disaffiliated. It's about 56 million Americans. Well, if you translate that into the Catholic world, we know there's about 5.4 million unaffiliated Catholic young adults between 15 and 25. We also know there's about 20 million former Catholics now, which makes former Catholics the second largest denomination in the United States. In the fascinating, Catholics are the largest. We are somewhere between 65 and 70 million in the United States, depending on whose stats you read. Second largest is former Catholics. Third largest denomination is Southern Baptists. There's about 16 million Southern Baptists. So isn't that fascinating? Just to give you a sense of the scope of this territory that you and I are involved in here. And one of the things it points towards is that as we have this conversation today, we don't have a youth issue. We don't have a young adult issue. We have a faith community issue about how we pass on faith to the succeeding generations. I think it's really important because if we frame this wrong, if we frame this as this is a youth issue, we're going to solve the wrong problem. There's such a difference between what Ronald Heifetz, a professor at Harvard, he wrote a book called Leadership Without Easy Answers, and he said there's a difference between a technical problem, which you can solve with the resources you have, and an adaptive problem, which takes a new way of thinking. I would maintain that we have an adaptive problem in our faith community. I think there's a systemic change going on. I think this is much bigger than let's just have better recruitment techniques and this problem will go away. Simply not going to happen. It's not the reality of the territory. So what's that mean for us? I want to just give you a snapshot, and here's why this is important. It's not the numbers that's important, although 55.8 million people unaffiliated is pretty significant. It's the rapid rise from 2007 to 2014. That's the significant part of this. Researchers would say that's a huge jump in 7 years. So we are seeing a tsunami effect in all denominations. And this is not just a Catholic issue. It's all organized religion. And I'll get back to that towards the very end. And here's another way of looking at it, just to make it, give you a different perspective on this. If you look at the really dark blue, I like on this little thing here. It's dark blue on my computer, dark gray on your screen. The dark gray is those young people between 18 and 29. It's that middle group, the lighter gray, that's people who are between 30 and 49. Look what's happening here. The disaffiliated are not just youth and young adults. One of the benefits of the research that we've been doing at St. Mary's Press is that it's put us in relationship with other researchers across the U.S. who are looking at the same issue. And there's a guy, Josh Packard, out of the University of Northern Colorado. He just released a study called Church Refugees. If we're studying the nones, he is studying the dones. He estimates that there's about 30 million people who are engaged in their denominations, engaged in their congregations, who have walked away, and he said they're simply done with church. They're done with the politics, they're done with the judgment, they're done with the rules and the regulations, they're done with church. And he estimates that there's probably another 10 to 13 million people, he calls them the almost dones. These are people in our pews who have a foot out the door. So with a little bit of foreshadowing, ever since the Pennsylvania report broke in the news, every time we do this presentation, the question becomes, how does this affect our youth and young adults? Is this pushing them more and more out the door? Do you know who's pushing out the door? The almost dones. The week that report broke in the news, in my own parish, 2 highly committed Catholic women engaged in our parish, both of them said to me independently, their language, that's it, I am done. I am out of here. I can't take any more of this. I think it's the almost dones who are the ones who are being so greatly affected by this, by the clergy abuse, this new clergy abuse crisis and the lack of transparency in the church. That's what seems to be happening here. So this highlights for me, though, that it goes back to the idea it's not a youth issue. It's a faith community issue. And you know what that's going to mean? It's going to mean the only way you can deal with a systemic issue like that is by a high level of collaboration among pastoral leadership. So it's not a youth ministry issue, it's not a religious ed, it's not a school versus parish issue. And I'm going to say liturgy is as important to this issue as anything else we're doing. I'll come back. But so you see that, and how important it's going to be for us to start thinking bigger around how we approach this new shifting territory. Having said that, then, we went to some of the statistics about what they call Catholic markers. And you can see this. These are typically the signs of what it means to be Catholic. One of the things I like about being Catholic is that we have stats on everything. I mean, seriously. You know, we have numbers. They may not all be accurate, but we have them. For any of you who've ever filled out your parish reports, I know that you don't do this. When I was in Baltimore, my third side in Baltimore, how many people did this? I think this sounds like a good number. I think I'll take last year's number at 5%. Off we go. Except for around Catholic traffic, we always had a 5% increase. I don't know how that happened. But anyway, so you can look at these markers over the last 17 years. Look at the decline in the markers as Catholics. And if these are the, think about this. If this is how we describe Catholic identity, okay, so look at the implication of that. In fact, when the research says the only thing that has gone up, and in your head, I think you already have the answer, is the number of former Catholics. So over the last 17 years, you can see the growth, you can see the issue here, the decline in identity, the decline in traditional identity as Catholic versus the number of former Catholics. So you start to see some of those numbers, so that's an issue for us. So here's where we come in. Here's where St. Mary's Press research comes in and your interest comes in. We were looking specifically at 15 to 25-year-old. That was the generation we wanted to look at. And here's one of the long-term ripple effects of this. Typically, our young adult generation, as they move from the 20 to 30-year-old, 20 to 35-year-old, typically, that's the generation from whom we would expect to find most of our vocation to ordained life, to religious life. We find most of our lay ecclesial ministers, and not to be Machiavellian about this, or whatever the word is, that would be the group we would expect to replace the baby boomers in terms of our financial support of the church. Well, the unintended consequences, if we don't pay attention, I mean, you see, and I don't want to be mercenary about this in terms of financing, but it is funny how finances sometimes captures our attention, like immediately. So you start to see this ripple effect. That's why this is such an important issue for us to confront head on and to have these kinds of conversations. Having said that then, here are some of the demographics of the people that we work with. And all this is in the study that's out in the hallway that St. Mary's Press has in their booth. So here's some of the demographics. We found it equally split between male and female. Now that was interesting, because there was an image that said, well, you know what, typically it's men who walk away, women are more faithful to the church. There's a shift in the territory. And here's the second thing. We looked at culture, we looked at ethnic culture. There's a myth out there that says, well, you know what's going to happen? The Hispanic community in the United States is going to save the Catholic Church because of the high percent of recently arrived immigrants who are Catholic. You know what the research is saying? Not true. As you move to second, third generation, their percent of disaffiliation are the same as in the Anglo community. In fact, I suspect this is a major part of conversation happening at the 5th and Quintra this week. Or it needs to be. It needs to be part of that conversation about what's going on in our church today. So it just gives you a sense in terms of ethnic background, the breakdown of our research. I do think that this needs more research, but this is our initial findings here. Fascinating when we asked them. We asked them, at what age did you stop affiliating with the church? And now, this is an important question. Watch this carefully. We asked them, at what age did you stop affiliating? You stop identifying as Catholic. That's different than when did you walk away from the church, okay? Now, just hold on to that difference. And sometimes data gets misquoted, and I just think that's a sin. Anyway, we just got to be clear about our language. We asked them, at what age did you stop identifying as Catholic? And I'll explain why I think this is so important. So I hope you had an age in your mind, but the median age is 13. Now think about this. And here's why the language itself is important. First up, am I having a stroke? Jesus is coming for me. All right. So this is important. Look at this. Look from the 10-year-old around to the 20-year-old. we get about 75%. So about 75% of those in our study stop identifying as Catholic between the age of 10 and 20. Now think about it. If you were in business and you were losing 75% of your clientele between 10 and 20, where would you put your resources? And I still maintain it, especially young adult ministry, so is underfunded in the church, that we need to be paying attention to this. That myth that was out there, that you know what happens with youth and young adults, they're crazy, but that's actually not the myth. That part is true. I confirm that. They're crazy, but here's what the myth is. They're going to leave anyway. College, jobs, move around, get married. But when they get married, they'll come back. Here's the first part of the myth. You know, according to Kara, only 39% of Catholics today are being married in the church. They're not coming back to get married. Well, when they have children, they'll come back for baptisms. You saw what percent of baptisms that has dropped down. They're not coming back for that. They'll come back for religious ed. Yeah, maybe around sacramental prep time for those who are on the margins. You see what's happening. This whole idea. That's why this is so important. Now, I will say this. Look at this one. 5% are under 5 years old. All right, now I have a suspicion no 5-year-old is up and running. I think today I'm going to stop identifying as Catholic. They can't even spell Catholic. But I do think it's pointing towards the impact of family. I suspect when these young adults look backwards, they will, you know, that was when my family left. That's when my family walked away. It just gives us a sense. Now, and here's the other part of why this is important. I've made up these terms, but if I put them in PowerPoint, then that makes it true. I differentiate between the unchurched and the ungospel. And here's what I mean. The unchurched is exactly what it says. The unchurched are those who walked away from organized religion. They are no longer affiliated with the denomination, unchurched. I have a suspicion